Okay, so we're going to be going over uh, uh, Babylonian Talmud, Tractate Kiddushin, uh, page 67, A and B. This is going to be a quick run through of exactly what is there, um, without going into like the notes or anything like that. So I'm part of an MDY, or I'm part of a Daf Yomi group, Merkaz Daf Yomi, that's based out of Israel. So um, Israel is a day ahead of the diaspora as far as the schedule for the Daf Yomi goes. So this will be tonight. The shir will be given tonight, and their link for that shir you can attend on Zoom is actually on the Facebook live feed. It's not on the Instagram live feed because I don't know how to do technology very well. But let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so prayer before study. This is found on the, so if you have like a Babylonian Talmud Bavli, on the front page. It's right there. So. Yehi ratzon upanecha Adonai Elohai shalei yeira daber takaleha al yedei mele akasho vedaber halakha veyismachu li chavri ela amer al tame tehor ela al tehor tame ela ikashelu chavri vedaber halakha veyismach behem. Ki Adonai Yitin Chakma Mapev Das Dat Utavenaha V'al Eani Ve'abetaha Nafleot Me Toratecha. Okay, let's jump into it. Okay. Okay. So we'll jump right into it. A convert to Judaism who married a mamzeress. Let's backtrack here a little bit. So we're going to start from where the Gemara starts in 66b4. So we have context of what is being said here. The guy jumps into. Okay, the Gemara challenges the first ruling of the Mishnah. The Mishnah stated in every case where there is a betrothal and there's no transgression, the offspring follows the male. Shimon said to Ar Yochanan, this is an absolute general rule that in literally every case where there's betrothal and there's no transgression, the offspring follows the male. Question. But there's the case of, now 67a, a convert to Judaism who married a mamzeress, where there is a betrothal and there's no transgression, and nevertheless the offspring follows the blemished party and not the unblemished father. For it was taught in a baraisa, in the case of a convert who married a mamzeress, the offspring is a mamzer, like his mother. These are the words of Ar Yossi. It would seem then that the Mishnah's rule is not absolute, but that there are exceptions to it. This conclusion is rejected. Ar Yochanan said to Ar Shimon, do you maintain that the Mishnah is in accord with Ar Yossi, who held that no transgression is involved in the marriage of a convert and a mamzeress? In point of fact, our Mishnah is consistent with Ar Yehuda, who said in a baraisa, a convert may not marry a mamzeress. And so this is a case where there is a betrothal and there is a transgression, and the offspring follows the blemished party, i.e. his mother, and thus accord the status of mamzer. Hence, the ruling in this case is consistent with the second general rule of the Mishnah and is not an exception to the first. The Gemara asks, but if it is so that the case of a convert and a mamzeress exemplifies the second general rule, let us teach it among the other cases listed there. The Gemara answers, Natani stated, in every case of the latter category to include any case in that category that was expressly mentioned. The Gemara offers a different answer to its original question, and if you prefer, say that. In reality, our Mishnah is in accord with Ar Yossi, who said that a convert is permitted to marry a mamzeress. And indeed, the Tanya stated which case is this, before enumerating the various cases and category precisely to exclude other cases from the previously stated rule. The offspring follows the male. And the Gemara challenges this interpretation of the Tanya's words. And is it only in those cases listed under which case is this, that the offspring follows the male, and in no others that belong to the first category? But there is the additional case of a halal who married a regular Jewess, where there is betrothal and there is no transgression, and indeed the offspring of that union follows the male. Why did the Tanya omit mention of this case? The Gemara answers, this is not difficult. Our Tanya holds like the opinion of R. Dostai bin R. Yehuda, who stated that offspring of a halal and a regular unblemished Jewess do not become halalim. Hence, our Tanya justifiably omitted mention of the case of a halal and a Jewess, for since their offspring do not follow the male, the case does not conform to the Mishnah's first general rule. The Gemara again challenges that the explanation that only those cases listed in the Mishnah conform to the first general rule. But there is the additional case of a regular Jew who married a Halela, where there is betrothal and there is no transgression. And indeed, the offspring of that union follows the male. Why did the Tanya omit mention of this case? The Gemara answers, the Tanya stated in every case of the first category to include any case in that category that was not expressly mentioned. The Gemara challenges this interpretation. But if it is so that the case of a regular Jew and a Halela exemplifies the first general rule, let us teach it explicitly among the other cases listed there. The Gemara defends the Tanya's omission of that case. The Tanya did not enumerate the case of a regular Jew and a Halela because he could not teach it succinctly along with the other cases. For how should he teach it? Shall he state this is the daughter of a Kohen, Levi, or Israel, or a Halela, who was married to a Kohen, Levi, or Israel? But is a Halela fit for a Kohen, since there was no way to enumerate the case of a Jew and a Halela with the consensus of expression favored by Tanaim, explicit mention of the case was omitted. The Gemara once again challenges the explanation that only those cases listed in the Mishnah conform to the first general rule. But there's another case where there is Kiddushin and there's no transgression and the offspring follows the male, namely the case of Rabba bar Chana. For Rabba bar Chana said in the name of Ar Yochanan, in the case of a second generation Egyptian man who married a first generation Egyptian woman, her son is of the third generation and is therefore permitted to marry a regular Jewess, since the offspring's generational status is reckoned from that of the father and not of the mother. This case conforms with the first general rule of the Mishnah and should have been taught explicitly. The Gemara responds, the Tanya stated in every case of the first category to include other cases in that category not. The Tanya stated in every case of the first category to include other cases in that category not expressly mentioned. And according to Rav Dimi, who said that the offspring of a second generation Egyptian man and a first generation Egyptian woman is of the second generation, since his generational status is reckoned from that of the mother. The Tanya stated which case is this before enumerating the other cases in the first category to exclude this case of first and second generation Egyptian converts from the previously stated rule, the offspring follows the male. The Gemara again challenges the first and general rule of the Mishnah. But there's another case where there is Kiddushin and there is no transgression, and yet the offspring follows the blemished parent and not the male, contrary to the Mishnah's general rule. And for when Rabin came from Eretz Israel to Babylonia, he said in the name of Ar Yochanan regarding the other nations, go after the male. But if they converted to Judaism, go after the more blemished one among the two of them. It would seem then that the Mishnah's first general rule is not absolute. The Gemara responds, the Tanya stated which case is this, before enumerating the other cases in the first category to exclude this case of Ammonite and Egyptian converts from the previously stated rule. The offspring follows the male. Hence, this rule is, in fact, not absolute. The Gemara above took the position that our Mishnah indeed accords with our Yossi. The Gemara now challenges that contention. What is this that you have said? It is well if you say that our Mishnah in accord with our Yehuda, for then the import of the inclusionary in every case, and the exclusionary. So it's the inclusionary in every case, referring to the where it states in every case, and the exclusionary, which case is this, referring to where it states in which case is this, is understood as follows. In every case of the first category comes to include in the general rule. The case of a regular Jew who married a Halela, and in that case of Rabba bar Chana. Further, which case is this of the first category comes to exclude from the general rule, those cases of Rav Dimi and Ravine. Further, in every case of the latter category comes to include in the general rule stated there, the offspring follows the blemished party. In the case of a convert who married a mamzeres, but if you say that our Mishnah is in accord with our Yossi, then the Mishnah is not easily interpreted. For it is true that according to our Yossi, in every case of the first category is indeed inclusionary. As we have stated, in which case is this, the first category is indeed inclusionary, as we have stated. But what does in every case the latter category come to include? Where do we find another case of there is Kiddushin and there is transgression, in which the offspring follows the blemished parent, apart from those cases enumerated in the Mishnah? The Gemara counters, but according to your reasoning, why is it necessary to state the exclusionary, which case is this, of the latter category according to Ar Yehuda, when in fact it excludes nothing? Rather, you must say in reply that since Netanya stated in the first category, which case is this, he stated in the latter category as well, which case is this, so as to achieve a symmetry of style within the category. Here too, regarding the inclusionary phrase of the second category, according to Ar Yossi, since the Tanya stated in the first category in every case, he stated in the latter category as well as in every case, so as to achieve a symmetry of style between the two categories. The Gemara examines a legal opinion that previously received only a brief mention. Let us now return to Ravine's statement itself to explain it more fully. When Ravine came from Eretz Israel to Babylonia, he said in the name of Ar Yochanan, regarding the other nations, go after the male, but if they converted to Judaism, go after the more blemished one among the two of them. The Gemara asks, what is the import of regarding the other nations, go after the male? The Gemara explains, it is as was taught in a Baraisa. From where is it derived in the case of in the case of someone from the nations other than the 7 nations of Canaan who cohabited with a Canaanite woman and begot a child with her, that you are permitted to purchase the child as a slave? Quick law, the Jewish definition of slave is totally different than the American abominational definition of a slave. Like a Hebrew slave and an American slave, it really shouldn't even be the same word because it does not mean the same thing at all. American slavery was horrific. American slavery is not Jewish slavery. Okay. Once again, that you are permitted to purchase the child as a slave. The Torah states, also from among the children of the residents who live with you, from among them you may purchase slaves. It might be thought that even in the reverse case of a Canaanite slave who cohabited with a maidservant from one of the other nations and begat a child with her, that you are permitted to purchase the child as a slave. The Torah states, also from among the children of the residents who live with you, whom they begot in your land. Scripture teaches that a Jew may purchase slaves only from among those children who were born in your land, and not from among those children who were born abroad to Canaanite fathers or foreign Gentile mothers, and who later returned to live with their fathers in your land. Scripture thus establishes that the offspring of Canaanite and non-Canaanite Gentiles is accorded his father's legal status, and it is to this specific case that Ravine referred. The Gemara now elucidates the second part of Ravine's ruling. Ravine had stated, but if they converted to Judaism, go after the more blemished one among the two of them. The Gemara queries concerning what case did Ravine issue this ruling. If we say that he spoke of a male Egyptian convert who married a female Ammonite convert and thus taught that their offspring is accorded the father's legal status, what blemish is there with regard to the mother? The Torah prohibits a male Ammonite convert from marrying a regular Jew, but not a female Ammonite convert. Since Ravine speaks of where both converts are blemished, but in unequal degrees, he could not have intended this case. The Gemara establishes the case. Rather, Ravine spoke of a male Ammonite convert who married a female Egyptian convert, and thus comes to teach that if this one, i.e., their offspring, is a male, cast him after his father. For with respect to a son, the Ammonite father is the more blemished parent. And if the offspring is a female, cast her after the mother. For with respect to a daughter, the Egyptian mother is the more blemished parent. the Mishnah stated, in the case of any woman who cannot have Kiddushin with a particular man, but can have Kiddushin with other men, their offspring is a mamzer. The Gemara asks, from where in Scripture do we derive this matter, that Kiddushin does not take effect between those who are prohibited to one another on pain of Karis? The Gemara offers an answer. For Archaya Bar Abba said, by the name of Ar Yochanan, and some are inclined in this matter to say that the explanation was stated in the name of Ar Benai, and Rab Acha, the son of Rabba, said that these people were inclined in this matter to say that the explanation was stated not in the name of Ar Yonai, but in the name of Ar Yosi Hagalili, as follows. The verse states, and she leaves his, i.e., the first husband's house, and goes and becomes a wife to another man. The verse thus teaches that the Achrim, she can become a wife to strangers, but not to relatives with whom she is forbidden to cohabit on pain of cares. In such cases, Kiddushin does not take effect. The Gemara objects. Our Abba challenges this interpretation of the verse, but say that the verse teaches instead, Mila Laven Le'acher, that the divorcee can become a wife to a stranger, but not to a son of her former spouse. If, however, she illegally married any of the other relatives with whom she is forbidden to cohabit on pain of cares, the Kiddushin would take effect. Question. The Gemara answers. Bein beharadia katev behia. It is expressly written with regard to a son. La'yikach eish et eshit aviv. A man shall not take his father's wife. Inasmuch as Kiddushin between a divorcee and her former spouse's son is expressly invalidated by this verse, why do I need the other verse? And she goes and becomes a wife to another man to invalidate it, since, in fact, that other verse, another man, is not needed for the case of the son. Learn from it generally, le'acharen, that a woman can have Kiddushin and become a wife to strangers, but not to relatives with whom she is forbidden to cohabit on pain of cares. The Gemara again challenges this interpretation, but say that both verses refer to the former spouse's son, and that this specific verse, a man shall not take his father's wife, forbids the son to betroth her before the fact, but does not invalidate the Kiddushin if he does so. Okay. Behe David, in this other verse, and becomes a wife to another man, teaches that even after the fact, the Kiddushin does not take effect. If, however, the divorcee illegally married any of the other relatives with whom she is forbidden to cohabit on pain of cares, the Kiddushin would take effect. Question. The Gemara answers. The specific verse, a man shall not take his father's wife, is not needed to enjoin the son from marrying her before the fact, for that provision is derived from the stricture against marrying the sister of one's wife, as follows. Umeya achud sheha bekeret lay and take a dosh. Since you may not marry your wife's sister, who is forbidden to you on pain of cares, maybe take. I don't know if I said that correctly in Hebrew. Okay, so certainly you may not marry one of those who are prohibited to you on pain of death by one of the four methods of execution administered by the court. Since execution is a more severe punishment than cares, the prohibition against marrying one's father's wife can be derived logically from the prohibition against marrying one's wife's sister. Thus, the specific verse, a man shall not take his father's wife, is free to invalidate a Kiddushin performed between the son and his father's former wife, so that the general verse, and becomes a wife to another man, can invalidate a Kiddushin between relatives who are forbidden to one another on pain of cares. The Gemara again objects to this understanding, but say that both verses concern the sister of one's wife, and that this specifies in the specific verse, you shall not take a woman in addition to her sister, forbids a husband to betroth her before the fact, but does not invalidate the Kiddushin if he does so. And this other verse, and becomes a wife to another man, teaches that even after the fact the Kiddushin does not take effect. with respect to all of the relatives forbidden to one another on pain of cares. However, the Kiddushin would take effect. However, the Kiddushin would take effect, question mark. The Gemara accepts this interpretation of the two verses, but nonetheless argues that the law stated in the case of a wife's sister can be applied to all of the relatives forbidden to one another on pain of cares. Ayin haki dami. Indeed, it is so that the verse, and becomes a wife to another man, which teaches that even after the fact Kiddushin does not take effect, applies only to the case of a wife's sister. Nevertheless, now that we have found that the Torah invalidates a Kiddushin performed with one's wife's sister, from where do we derive that the Torah similarly invalidates a Kiddushin performed with any of the other relatives forbidden on pain of cares? Indeed, we derive it from the case of a wife's sister, as follows. Just as the case of a wife's sister is distinctive, for she is a forbidden relation to the brother-in-law, and they are liable to receive cares for intentional transgression of the prohibition, and are liable to bring a chatas sacrifice for inadvertent transgression, and further, Kiddushin does not take effect when performed with her. So in any case where the woman is a forbidden relation, and they are liable to receive cares for her intentional transgression, and are liable to bring a chatas sacrifice for her inadvertent transgression, Kiddushin should not take effect. Hence, through application of the rule of binyan av, the passage of the wife's sister, teaching that in all cases of relations forbidden on pain of cares, Kiddushin does not take effect. The Gemara challenges the assertion that the law in all cases of forbidden relations can be derived from the passage of a wife's sister. Bishlema kolehu atein. It is reasonable to say that, indeed, the law concerning most all of the forbidden relations derives from the passage of a wife's sister, that in each of those cases as well, Kiddushin does not take effect. However, with respect to in the cases of another man's wife and a brother's wife, there are grounds to refute the ma mitzenu teaching of the passage of a wife's sister as follows. Whereas the prohibition against marrying a wife's sister is potent, as evidenced by the fact that she is not permitted even in a situation where the commandment to marry her arises, can you ascribe the same power to the prohibition against marrying a brother's wife, who is permitted in a situation where the commandment to marry her arises? The second refutation. With respect to in the case of another man's wife as well, there are grounds to refute the ma matzenu teaching as follows. Whereas the prohibition against marrying those women, i.e. a wife's sister, is potent, as evidenced by the fact that she is not permitted to marry her brother-in-law during the lifetime of the one who prohibits her to him, i.e. her sister, the brother-in-law's wife. Can you ascribe the same power to the prohibition against marrying another man's wife, who is permitted to remarry during the lifetime of the one who is prohibited who prohibits her to other men, i.e. her husband? Since it is possible to refute the ma matzenu teaching with regard to two cases, the Gemara abandons it. The Gemara now offers another method of deriving from the case of a wife's sister that Kiddushin does not take effect between any two individuals who are forbidden to one another on pain of cares. Rather, Ar Yonah said, and some say that it was Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yeshua, who said, the verse stated, for if anyone commits any of these abominations, the person doing so will be cut off from among their people. All the cases of forbidden relations are likened to the case of a wife's sister, to teach just as in the case of a wife's sister, Kiddushin does not take effect with her. So with regard to all the forbidden relations, Kiddushin does not take effect with any of them. The Gemara challenges this interpretation. If it is so, that all the forbidden relations mentioned in the passage are likened to the case of a wife's sister for purposes of deriving that a Kiddushin with any of them does not take effect. Oh, and there we go. And that's the end of 67, and then we'll jump back on 68. So there's a whole lot of prior knowledge that would be required to have. If you don't have a decent amount of prior knowledge of like different topics, then this is going to be tough to make sense of. So just a heads up, if it doesn't make sense, it's is because like Talmud studies can kind of be thought of like as like analogous to like a 200 level course or 300 level course, where like don't even try jumping into organic chemistry if you haven't taken like Gen Chem 1 and 2 type analogy. But nonetheless, it's holy, it's kadosh, it's the Torah of Hashem is perfect, restoring the soul, or Torah of Hashem is perfect. I think restoring the soul. I don't know if I said that quote exactly correctly, but yeah.